And I'm Trevor Corson. I am the author of this book, The Story of Sushi. I am also, weirdly, America's only sushi concierge, which I'm sure you've never heard of before, because I had never heard of one until I invented the idea. And I'm going to tell you how to impress your date at the sushi bar with some unknown secrets of sushi etiquette and how to interact with sushi bar. But first, I'm going to tell you a brief story about how not to impress your date at the sushi bar. And this is an experience that I had. It's a little story about my own first encounters with sushi. And it started with my first serious girlfriend, who was Japanese. And of course, when you're dating someone from another culture, that's often an excellent way to learn a little bit of the language. Except that you end up learning things that maybe aren't really that useful in daily life, like things you're not really supposed to know how to say. So slang, cuss words, that kind of stuff, very easy to remember, fun to use, but not that useful in daily exchanges. So she and her Japanese friends would teach me these Japanese stories, Japanese words to use. They would tell me little stories to help me remember them, that kind of thing. One day we were all eating sushi, and I got a big glob of wasabi on my sushi, went in my mouth, sent that spiciness up my nose, and I made this face. And of course they immediately knew what had happened. I'd gotten a bunch of wasabi up my nose, and they said, "We have a word for that in Japanese. Here's another word you can learn, Trevor. When you get wasabi up your nose, you say, kiku, which means like, oh, the burn, or like, oh, that's powerful stuff." So, okay, I'll remember that. So years later, I was back in the U.S., trying to get to know some new Japanese friends, and went out for sushi with a group of folks. There were some attractive women in the group. I was trying to make a good impression. I thought, I know, I'll impress them with my Japanese language skills. Right? So I get this big glob of wasabi, add it to my sushi, stick it in my mouth, and go, "Iku!" When I opened my eyes, dead silence around the table. Everybody's staring at me with this mixture of horror and amusement. And finally somebody says, "You just said you're having an orgasm." And I realized, indeed, I had mixed up two Japanese words I know, kiku and iku. So of course all I could think of to say was, wow, this sushi's really, really good. So, that's maybe one way, depending on what kind of date you're on, to impress your date at the sushi bar. But I don't necessarily recommend it, so I'm going to give you some other more sophisticated tips for eating sushi at the sushi bar. And you all have these little cards, I hope. If you don't, grab one off the chairs. There's a stack of them here, actually, so why don't I put a stack on this front chair. And these are some tips that I kind of condensed from the process of researching and writing my book. So the book, I want to tell a story about sushi. This is the story of sushi, the history of it, the cuisine, how it's made. You learn all this stuff, but I wanted to tell it in an accessible way. So it's actually the story of a group of American sushi novices learning to become sushi chefs in LA. And I follow them through their training at this sushi training academy in LA for sushi chefs. Very funny story. There are a bunch of clueless American kids who show up at this sushi academy wanting to become sushi chefs, not having any idea what they're in. It's this kind of Top Chef play-by-play thing as they go through their training and learn to make sushi and become chefs. So that's the story in the book. There's tons of info in the book all about sushi, stuff that I had no idea. I lived in Japan for 3 years and ate sushi there regularly, and there was all kinds of things I had no idea about that I learned, which were very surprising. So that's all in here. But what I'll do right now is just run through some of the tips that I put on this card. And what I discovered was that there's a huge misunderstanding and a huge gap between American customers who love eating sushi and sushi chefs who are making it, especially the traditional, very skilled ones. And this is a big problem in the world of sushi. I went around talking to all kinds of sushi chefs all over the place, and they kept telling me the same thing over and over again. I can't use my skills here because the customers don't know what to do, and they don't understand it. And then I would hear exactly the same thing from the other side, from all the American sushi aficionados I talked to, saying, how do I get the real sushi experience? How do I get that, what a Japanese person comes in and sits down at the sushi bar next to me, and they're getting a totally different meal. That's what I want to eat, but I can't get it from the chef. So part of my effort is writing this book and being a sushi concierge. I'm actually trying to help people cross that gap. And so as a sushi concierge, actually what I do is people hire me to go eat dinner with them. And so I go sit at the sushi bar and I take them to a chef that I know, that I've cultivated a relationship with. And it sounds crazy, and people are always totally skeptical of this. Like, what do you mean a sushi concierge? Who needs a sushi concierge? And then they sit down and they have the meal with me, and I explain to them what's going on, what the chef's doing, and I prep with the chef beforehand. So the chef is preparing a very, very authentic traditional sushi meal, and I explain what the issues are in terms of appreciating that. And it's just a wonderful experience to see their whole experience of sushi change and go, oh, this is how it can be. This is what I wanted, but I didn't know how to get it. And then they can go back to that chef over and over again and get that experience, because now they know what to shoot for. But, you know, for people who aren't necessarily going to be lucky enough to actually eat dinner with me, and I am a charming dinner guest. I always tell my sushi orgasm story to get things started. The chef's always rolling his eyes, not again. You know? So the first tip on my card is get to know a chef, develop a relationship with a chef. So actually, to impress your date at the sushi bar, the best thing to do is to go to a sushi bar, you know, for a while without the date first, so that then you become an insider, right? So by the time you bring the date, like, the chef knows you, and your date's blown away, like you're a VIP the second you walk in the door. However, there's a lot of weird issues here. There's a sushi chef who works at Morimoto's here in New York, a young, actually Caucasian guy named Robbie Cook, very cool guy. I highly recommend you go check him out. And I was talking about this whole issue with him, and he was saying, yeah, you know, people come in to our restaurant on a date, and they have this American date mentality in their head that they want to sit at a table, the two of them, and have this romantic dinner. And he's saying, they don't get it. The people who come and sit at the sushi bar and have a relationship with the chef, that always really impresses the date, because then they're getting this whole Japanese experience of interacting with the chef and special treatment, which is what's so wonderful about the sushi bar. So people, you know, here in New York, where do you go to eat, right? That's always the big thing. What's the best place? You want to get the inside scoop, you know, read the latest magazine, find out what the latest recommendation is. I'm here to tell you, as America's only sushi concierge, that you don't need that. That is actually not the best way to get the best sushi at all, finding out what the best place is. In my opinion, people are always asking me, you're the sushi expert, you wrote the book, where do you eat sushi? What do you recommend? Can you recommend 5 of your favorite places for me in New York? And I say, no, I probably even haven't eaten at 5 sushi places in New York, believe it or not. There's one chef that I love. I know exactly what he's going to do. Not the same thing every time, of course, but his style. He knows me. He knows what I like. Every time. I would go back to that chef every time, over and over again, and skip the menu. I don't ever order. It's about the relationship with that chef, and every time it's different, and every time it's fabulous. So I always encourage people, rather than trying to figure out where the best sushi place is, the first step to impressing your date at a sushi bar is just find a chef that you like, that's willing to talk with you, and that you go back to again and again, and start to develop a relationship, and ask that chef to educate you and bring out his skill set. So that's the first tip on here. So you don't need the whole, like, the hottest sushi place, you know, in New York right now is X. Forget it. Go to your local neighborhood place, or to the shop around till you find a chef who's chatty and fun, and we'll do this with you. In Japan, the sushi chefs I experienced there tend to be kind of neighborhood bartenders. You know, they worked in their local neighborhood, and they knew the locals, and it was a really fun communal experience. Okay, so on to the second point. But before we get to, like, how do you convince a sushi chef to do this with you, to go to this place with you, right? Because it's so hard. They've given up on Americans. Most of the sushi chefs I talk to have pretty much given up on trying to educate American consumers. And there's reasons for that. We're both guilty on both sides of the sushi bar. The chefs don't make enough effort to educate us. As consumers, we don't necessarily make enough effort to educate ourselves, and hope that the book helps with that. But the first item on the list, after getting to know your local sushi chef or developing a relationship with the chef, ask the chef to pack the sushi loosely. And everything I'm talking about is sitting at the sushi bar, not at a table, okay? So that's the first thing, is always sit at the sushi bar and try to interact with the chef. And many chefs will not even go there with you. You know, they'll just do this stone-faced, stoic thing. Try. If it doesn't work, go somewhere else, find a chef that will. So first, ask the chef to pack the sushi loosely. I have a little story to tell you with this. When my book first came out, the NPR station in LA wanted to go eat sushi with me and record the experience to broadcast on the radio. And they were like, so what's a real sushi meal like? You know, how does it go? So we went in, And so the other reporters is like also tall, like gangly white guy, right? And the two of us walk into this very old sushi bar in LA. It's